My name is Claire Stuchbery. I'm the Executive Director of the Local and Independent News Association. So we go by LINA, and we are a relatively new organisation. We've been running for nearly 3 years now, so that still feels quite young. This is our third annual summit. So we bring together newsmakers from around the country who are operating in digital newsrooms and who are serving their communities in a range of different ways. And it's a really exciting time of year for us to bring people together into one space and have a whole range of conversations about emerging trends in the industry. We talk about changing technologies. We talk about the way that we deal with editorial policies. We talk about content and the way we approach it. And we talk a lot about business structures and how to make newsrooms as sustainable as possible. So they're kind of some of the themes, I guess, that we've been talking about over 3 days now here in Naarm in Melbourne. And we're at the Melbourne Connect building at the moment, which is the home of the conversation and part of the University of Melbourne. So we've partnered with the Centre for Advancing Journalism here to be able to be in this space. And we've brought together around about 150 people from different parts of the country and also some international speakers as well to share their expertise with people who might be working in newsrooms just by themselves or might be quite well established newsrooms. So there's quite a range of news services that are here, and we really get excited when people are sharing their knowledge across those different types of newsrooms. Some who are yet to start, people who are just establishing their newsrooms and are ready to launch, and people who might have been operating in the news space for 40 or 50 years who are looking at ways to evolve their businesses and meet audiences where they're at. So there's a real range of motivations for people to be here, and it's really just all about learning and sharing and being able to help each other in a movement of independent publishers.
When you said 150 people, is that 150 publishers, or how many sort of publications were represented roughly?
Ballpark, I think there's about 80 different publishers represented here, and then there's also, I mean, some publishers have brought multiple people to the conference, and other people are here as other parts of the media industry or stakeholders, a couple of policymakers and people who might be suppliers who partner with industry as well. So there is a strong representation of publishers in the LINA membership. Of course, that's what the conference is about, but then also some supporters who are here to share their knowledge too.
Our readers are very interested in misinformation, disinformation as a massive public health issue. So was there much discussion of that at the conference, at the summit, and more broadly, generally, how do you see the role of your members in tackling misinformation, disinformation?
We think about local news and independent newsmakers as in a lot of ways as the antidote to mis and disinformation, and our role at LINA is significantly focused on strengthening public interest journalism in particular. So the role of providing high quality news services to communities and in a way that is relevant to them, so on topics that are relevant to them and as reported by people who are close to the actual facts, is a really significant way to combat mis and disinformation. And we see that play out in local areas all the time. We see it in emergency response in particular. That's something that we've seen recently. We've seen people be able to investigate all kinds of different projects or fact check things that they see in their area because the reporters that we're working with are embedded in their communities. So they're on the Facebook groups. They see some of the things that are circulating and can take the time to say, well, is that correct? Or what is that report? Oh, it turns out that report is from a fake university, or as it turns out that that quote isn't correct at all. So that sort of verifying of the information that is circulating in communities as and when it starts to take hold, I suppose, and when it starts to kind of gather momentum is a really significant role that people can only do if they're actually close to those communities and see it bubbling up. And we see that play out in local news in particular all the time, but also in independent newsrooms who are close to sources and have that kind of embedded knowledge to be able to go, hold on, this doesn't seem quite right. And then also to build media literacy around our readers as well, and to help educate audiences around journalistic processes and what actually fact-checked and verified information might look like. What are the processes of journalism that don't just report information as we find it, but we do look into different sources and we do look at what is fact and what is not. And to share that with audiences is an educating process. It's a little bit like showing our work. And so there's been a lot of conversation at the summit around how we can do that best. And it's really becoming a focal point, I suppose, in lots of spaces because of the rise of mis and disinformation around how we combat that, mainly through our work.
If LINA members are important in tackling misinformation, disinformation, which is such a big issue, not just for health, but for democracy, policy, blah, blah, blah. Are we investing as a country enough in our local and independent media?
Absolutely not, is the answer to that. The capacity of newsrooms to be able to combat mis and disinformation is wholly dependent on their resourcing, really. And we know that a lot of newsrooms are really struggling, and we've seen the closure of newsrooms across the country over the last decade in particular, and accelerating over the last decade. It's been heartening to see some newsrooms opening up. Mainly since COVID, we've actually seen newsrooms emerging and starting to serve audiences where they've seen identified gaps in the market and where people have been community-minded and gone, you know what, I'm actually really passionate about this community. I can see here that people are not getting the information that they need. That is heartening, but the struggle is absolutely real, and people do that out of a sense of service to their community more so than out of money. Nobody's in this area for the money. So the capacity to do that from individuals is primarily self-funded, particularly in the beginning, and we absolutely need support from anybody, from government and also from things like the philanthropic sector to help, I guess, build capacity for newsroom sustainability. So that's about trying to build business models and income streams that all require time and effort. And we talk a lot about the development of news products and the way that the news business model is evolving, which is absolutely an opportunity for the industry, but an opportunity that takes some resourcing to actually engage with.
Why isn't there the investment? What are the barriers? You know, whether it's from government or whether it's from philanthropy or, you know, lots of other sectors could also support newsrooms through advertising, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, there are a range of different reasons that people feel like, that news should be free. That's an element that comes from the public, is that people are used to information being free and don't realise that maybe news might be free, but journalism isn't. It's not free to produce. And the idea that I think, you know, newspapers in particular, well-off organisations, seems to be something that persists, even though that hasn't been accurate for a long time now, really. And so I think a lot of newsrooms have typically been operated by private business, and so there's an element of, I guess, survival of the fittest that goes with that, and maybe people not understanding how much of the news that they're actually looking at is syndicated news content that comes from somewhere else and isn't maybe representing the voices of the communities around Australia to the extent that they may or may not be aware of. So the conversations that we have with potential funders are largely focused on the diversification of news sources for audiences and the opportunity to represent diverse perspectives in our news landscape. Arguably, not everybody wants that, so that can be a barrier. But also I think the philanthropic sector understand it as an issue and have not necessarily wanted to fund newsrooms directly. There is a tension, I suppose, like there can be between advertising and news services. There's an editorial barrier there that, you know, that must be maintained, of course. And I think we've been able to do that in the advertising sector for a long time, and so I don't see why that couldn't carry over to the philanthropic sector as well. But people seem reluctant to fund newsrooms directly and then don't know how to fund it otherwise. And so those conversations are still, I guess, relatively new, and at the moment it's about relationship building with the philanthropic sector and with potential funders. But it's, I think the barrier at the moment is not necessarily understanding the urgency with which this industry needs support, and the fact that the rise of mis and disinformation is far outstripping the speed of the conversations of potential supporters.
I think research is a really good sort of model.
Absolutely.
Philanthropy funds research, it's done independently, it reports back, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean there are many examples of philanthropic input into projects without necessarily having to have input to the outcome.
So just finally, would you like to do a pitch for the collective crowdfunding? Tell us about that, when
Absolutely.
it is, why it matters, and how people watching this can engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, LINA piloted a collective fundraising campaign. We called it Our News, Your Voice. And newsrooms from across the country participate in a week-long giving campaign. This year it will be running from the 28th of April till the 4th of May, encompassing World Press Freedom Day, which is on the 3rd of May. And what we do is go out once a year and ask communities to contribute to the newsrooms that have been providing services to them all year round. So that's reader contributions, and we try to match that with funding from the philanthropic sector to help incentivise people to contribute to their local newsrooms. So we're looking for match funders at the moment who can help support that campaign. And what we see is people understanding the value of the newsrooms, but not necessarily knowing that they actually do need your financial support as well. And so this Giving Week, the Our News, Your Voice campaign really just helps people to get over the line and contribute even small amounts that make a really significant difference to news organisations. And often those people then who are able to contribute might continue to contribute at the rate of $5 a month, for example, through the year. And all of those incremental costs are really significant for small news outlets. So the Our News, Your Voice campaign is really about helping people understand the value of having a voice in their local communities, and that's not a given necessarily. And we see lots of areas around the country where there isn't a news service that represents the perspective of the people who live in that particular area or who are part of that community. And this campaign is really about highlighting the good work that is done in places where newsrooms are doing excellent things all through the year, and the campaign's bringing that to people's attention.
Of course, something else is happening on the 3rd of May. How do you think that ties into the campaign? What are the opportunities there?
Well, look, I think an election is, in many ways, is a significant example of the role of the importance of news, isn't it? When we think about the candidates in any given electorate, or we think about the candidates that are speaking on a particular issue like health, it's good for people to have information about what those array of options are to them so that they can make informed choices. And there's no more important time, I think, for news services than during an election period where in Australia we're all going to have to make a choice. And so making an informed choice about who those individuals are and what they stand for and what their policy objectives are is the best way to us actually to engage in decision making as a democratic country. So that's I think the timing of Our News, Your Voice campaign in the lead up to the election wasn't necessarily intended, because we had picked that date quite a while ago, but I think it highlights a time when news really comes into its own.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you would like to add or say that we haven't covered?
Oh, I think I should give a little shout out to Croakey Health Media and just say, look, it's been fantastic to have representatives from Croakey here at the LINA Summit this year, and I know that you've participated in previous summits as well, but to be able to support an organisation that does such important work in the audience that you speak to is really why LINA's here. So keep it up, and thank you.